Привіт! Ви дивитесь подкаст «Твоє.Моє. Ідентичність». Я Влада Недак. Сьогодні моя розмова із Джошуа Гершфілдом, американо-ізраїльським музичним продюсером та сонграйтером. Ми розкажемо про народження та шлях його рок-опери «Райс». Це невідома історія спротиву молодих єврейських жінок під час Голокосту. Деякими з них було лише 17. Його історія про особистий шлях у, здавалось би, швидкій американській реальності, де ідеї мають народжуватись і втілюватись легко, але насправді проходять через сумніви, втрати і наполегливий пошук свого місця в культурному просторі, як і всюди. I would like to start with the question about not your identity, but if you will introduce yourself to our listeners, who you are, what combination of roles, of feelings you are today.
Sure. I'm a writer and musician. Primarily, I've worked as a songwriter for some time, and also worked as an actor in various ways. And for the last 6 years or so, my primary efforts have been focusing on this musical and writing and composing it, and now producing it in various ways.
I mentioned that you are Israeli, American, Canadian person. Can you explain the combination of its nationality or its citizenship, how it works?
Sure, yeah. Well, I was born in Los Angeles, born and raised in Los Angeles. My father is Canadian. My father's side of the family were actually Jewish refugees from Ukraine to Canada. And then they moved to the United States when my father was 14 years old. So being born to him, I had Canadian citizenship, and being born in America and with my mom, I had American citizenship. And then when I was I think I was 33, 34, so it was, well into adulthood, I made Aliyah to Israel. I was in school there for graduate school for about a year and a half, and then I stayed and lived there for some time, and then lived back in the States, and then back in Israel, kind of went back and forth for a while. So hence the 3 citizenships and the 3 passports, which is really cool to have, but a nightmare when you have to renew all of them at the same time.
And the question, we heard a lot about Aliyah from this part of the world, from Europe, from Ukraine, from the countries which we say former Soviet Union. And how to do Aliyah? What is in your mind? American people. It's very typical story that at some age people just feeling and moving. Do you felt some kind of connection with Israel, or what was the reason?
Yeah, I think that the time that I spent there when I was in school, I had only been there once before I moved there, and it was a really significant experience for me, just in terms of it was, I think, probably my first experience of going someplace for the first time and feeling home, and wondering why is that? Why is it that I'm a foreigner in this country? Like the first time I went to Israel, I was like, I'm officially a foreigner in this place, and yet I feel quite at ease and I feel quite at home, and I feel like this is in many ways where I belong. And when I went back to the States, I felt different and changed somehow, and like I didn't quite belong there anymore. And it was not an initial impulse to make Aliyah and become an Israeli. It really took some time to have that solidify for me as something that I wanted. And even when I lived there and I was in school, it wasn't even like a certainty. But I think just as the time went on and as I felt more and more home there, I realized that really in a way, like I was Israeli. אני Israeli, you know, I just felt like I was. And going through the process of making Aliyah just kind of made it official. It's also sort of a funny thing, you know, if you do the process, you realize that I think that there is some kind of talk about making Aliyah that it feels quite romantic when people are talking about it. And then when you do it, you're like, oh, this is like, it is so much bureaucracy, you know, like in any country, you just realize that now you're like having to negotiate another bureaucracy. It's just in a different language. And it actually there are parts of it that are quite difficult. And the romanticism, if your reason for doing it is this kind of romantic, almost mythological drive, I think you will be disappointed, because the reason must be deeper than that, because it has to see you through some of the difficulty that the actual process entails.
Did you join the Israeli army? Did you serve for Israeli army? Had you this experience?
Yeah, so when I made Aliyah, like I said, I was in my mid-30s. And so I went to register, and they're like, no, you're like 10 years too late. So I didn't do it then. And then when October 7th happened, there was a call that went out for extra medics. They needed extra medics. So I actually am an EMT, a trained EMT in the States. So I signed up immediately, and I flew to Israel. And I registered with Ministry of Health and the Army and Hatzalah and Magen David Adom, just all these agencies that I could register as a volunteer medic. And I never got called in. And I think that was... there were probably a number of reasons, but one of them is just truly Israeli in fashion, I think, is that when they put out that call for additional medics, I was one of 6,000 that 6,000 extras that volunteered. So my name just ended up on this list of like 6,000 additional. So I ended up working as a medic with Achim Leneshek, which is a civilian aid organization made up of reservists. So that's what I did for my time there during the war.
You got your education in Israel.
My master's degree, yeah.
Yeah, and what type of education? Because I would like to see how you came to the idea of art, how it happened in your life.
Yeah. So the graduate degree that I got in Israel was in Holocaust studies. So it was an academic degree. Before that, I have a bachelor's degree that's in environmental studies. So I've studied music composition and got a minor in it, but I attempted to go to music school. I went to music school briefly and dropped out. I also went to acting school briefly and dropped out. So I'm a music school dropout and a drama school dropout. And so my degrees are actually in academic fields. Most of my training in music has been private study, and then the minor degree that I got in music composition. But, you know, that's just been something that I've done in seriousness and practiced in seriousness since then, and worked very hard at, and then worked as a professional songwriter for a producer in LA for about a decade as well.
Generally, the years of education, it was always like a long, like straight path, or it was some kind of looking for ideas or just general how to realize myself.
Yeah, I was very windy, and I look back on it now and it seems to make a kind of sense. But I think at the time, I don't think at the time it really did. It certainly didn't feel like it did to me. I probably gave my parents like about 3 heart attacks apiece, just, you know, trying things here and trying things there and doing this and doing that and ending up like going to other countries for years. And, you know, I think that school was difficult for me because I have a hard time, especially with creative pursuits. I think that, well, also with intellectual pursuits, I think I have a difficult time restricting myself to the confines of what's expected. So I'm very much a fan of education, but I have a difficult time in academic institutions, I think. So yeah, getting to college the first time actually took me quite a while. I left high school early. I tested out of high school because I just couldn't take it. And I ended up going to college early, thinking that I would graduate early and like be on this straight trajectory, you know, and it was gonna like, everything was just gonna happen a lot faster. And actually it just ended up being sort of confusing. And, you know, I ended up like I said, I went to music school. I went to a great music school, Berklee College of Music. It's like a music school that people like would love to go to. Yeah. And I was there and I was like, I don't want to do this. And I left and ended up going to a different college where the music department was one person and a couple pianos in a couple ramshackle practice rooms. And that was it, you know? But I actually really loved that environment because it felt so much more, so much less restricted. I felt just a little bit more free, that I still needed the rigor of academic demands, but in terms of what I created could be a little bit less restricted. And during that time, I took my first trip to Eastern Europe, and I think that was probably actually the beginning of Rise, because I ended up in Krakow for the first time and was very moved, I think, just by being in a place that had a very specific, a very particular kind of Jewish history. And that had, you know, Jewish history in the sense where, like, I remember going to a synagogue in Kazimierz and, you know, these like old synagogues that have survived the Holocaust and Nazism and Soviet occupation and pogroms. And these synagogues are still standing, and there's hardly any Jewish community, but there's some. And there was something about that that was very inspiring to me and really moved me in a way that I hadn't before. And I think it also called me back to Judaism in a way. And it was probably the beginning of kind of merging these paths of being a musician and being Jewish, and, you know, being creatively inspired by being Jewish and by Judaism and what all of that means, you know.
For me, it's important to bring our listeners that every time we see great picture or just a cool picture, it's a long way, and you did a long way, and it's not easy. Like for finding myself, to understanding myself. And in your situation, I see how it combines of personal individuality and identity and the artist. And everything develops so fast in modern world, but it still takes time for the people. I mean, maybe technology is really fast right now, but to find myself, it's still the way it was, like with the generation probably before me. I mean,
Sure.
And when we come closer to the rise to Rock-opera, I would like to ask your memories, or what do you know about your family who has these backgrounds, and how you save these memories about them.
Yeah. In terms of my own family's backgrounds, I mean, we're a little bit of a mystery. There's a bit of family history that's available, but it only goes a couple generations back. I tried to find out, you know, I know that at least half of us are the family tree runs through Ukraine. Teofipol specifically, is this a village you know the name of?
Yeah, you when you mentioned, I thought you missed with Ternopil, but it's not. It's two different places.
Yeah. It's a very small place.
Yeah,
apparently.
It's very small, tiny.
So I know that on the Hershfield side of my family tree that we run through there, and we're part of another family with the last name of Nittikmen. And I was able to find one mention of Nittikmen in the Yad Vashem archives. And that's kind of it. That's kind of it that we know of. We're just, it's, you know, like for many families, it's hard to find those records. You know, so when I was studying Holocaust studies, I had a lot of people ask me like, why, why are you doing this? You know, like why? Because it's not an easy subject to dive into. It's, you know, it's not easy. Obviously, it's not easy academically, but I mean, it's not easy, like, you know, emotionally and psychologically and stuff. So it's sort of the question does stand, like, why would you do this? And I think a lot of people assumed that it was because I felt, you know, I had like, you know, that maybe like my grandparents were survivors or something. But no, I mean, it was just, it's maybe something a little bit more general than that. I'm not sure. You know, I'm not sure what drew me so specifically to it. I think that it's, you know, I think when it's tricky, yeah, because when it comes to the Holocaust, you don't want to talk about the Holocaust as if it defines Jewish history, because Jewish history is like this long lineage, like it includes so much stuff. And it's not like, I think that there's a lot in Holocaust education. There are like a lot of issues that are brought up in the way that we're educated about the Holocaust, where it kind of is presented as if it's like this culmination of something. But for me, I think, you know, maybe the draw to it and the way that I tried to approach it, certainly the way I try to approach it with Rise, is that it's kind of like the most incredible example of Jewish resilience. That there really is not a darker time that we can look at and draw upon. And it's also really quite recent. And yet, if we look deep enough, it is full of incredible stories about Jewish survival and Jewish resistance and just the insistence on being human under inhuman conditions. So I think there was always something about that struck me and kind of carried me through the studies and carries me through all the trials and tribulations of working on Rise as well.
And let's talk about the Rise as the product. Just tell the story how it appears. I know it's a documentary. It's really stories of the women, which you recognized during your education, and how it combines and how it comes to the idea exactly of rock opera, not typical performance or not typical product for this issue, like Holocaust issue.
Yeah, it's definitely not, it's not typical, I think, And it's not a typical topic for a musical. I mean, it came about because during my studies, actually very early on, so I think it was probably the first few weeks that when I was in graduate school, I was just in class one day and my professor mentioned, one of my professors mentioned the couriers, who were young Jewish women who could disguise themselves or pass as Aryan. And they would sneak in and out of the ghettos, travel through Nazi territory, and smuggle back into the ghettos food and messages and clothing and medicine. And then by the time the uprisings were happening or being planned, they were the ones that smuggled in weapons to arm the fighters. So there's these stories of like young Jewish girls, like 17-year-old Jewish girls crossing through Nazi checkpoints with revolvers under their skirts. And I was like, hang on, what is this? This is like astounding. Like I was it just blew my mind. And I had never heard of that. And then I started to research and just look deeper. I mean, I just like popped the lid on it and ended up diving down into this rabbit's hole of research. And it seemed like most historians, or any historian that wrote about Jewish resistance certainly, talked about the couriers, but nothing was actually dedicated to them. And I just felt like this was, like these stories, once I started digging into them, these stories were just incredible. Like the magnitude of courage it must have taken to do this. They also were, I mean, they had such a short lifespan. It was one of the most dangerous jobs you could do as part of the underground resistance. I mean, I remember reading somewhere that once they volunteered to do it, their lifespan was like 3 or 4 months. So you're saying if you were a courier and you were a courier for 4 months, that was like an incredible achievement. That's how fast that they were captured and killed, or what. I mean, it's just an amazing accomplishment to have done it, and an amazing testament to courage, I think.
And you work with archives?
I did, yeah. So specifically, quite a bit. I worked at the Lohameha Ghettoot, which is the ghetto fighters' house, museum and archives. It's outside Akko in Israel, and they have an incredible place. It's the story of the place is quite amazing itself. It was founded by survivors of the Warsaw Ghetto uprising. And they came to this spot, this plateau outside Akko, and they built before they had a structure for themselves to sleep in, they built a structure to house the documents and the photographs and the diaries of their fallen comrades that they had smuggled in. So they built this structure to keep these documents safe. They slept down the ground. The documents slept in this structure. And over the years and the decades, that structure turned into the Ghetto Fighters House Museum. And they still have, it's one of the only places that has the actual diaries and the actual accounts of the couriers. One that really made a big impression on me was this girl, Justina. Gusta Dranger was her name, but her name she went by was Justina. She, one of the couriers in Rise is named after her. And she was captured, and she was part of the Krakow ghetto uprising. And she was captured by the Nazis, and she was held in a cell. And while she was held in the cell, in between rounds of being tortured, she had managed to smuggle a pencil, and she scrawled out in pencil on strips of toilet paper. She wrote out an account of their group, of the uprising in the ghetto, and of her comrades. And those strips of toilet paper were smuggled to couriers on the outside of the jail. And Justina did not survive the war, but that account did. And those strips of toilet paper with her writing on it are actually at the Ghetto Fighters House. And it's been translated into English. It's been translated into numerous languages. So of course I read it, but I also, in their archives, saw them. And that's just one example of like some of the things that they have there. So, I mean, I just dove into that and kind of became obsessed with it. I mean, I fell in love with them. I fell in love with their stories. And I couldn't not do something with their stories. I was just like, this is so incredible. It's incredible what they did. It's incredible that I didn't know about them, that no one knows about them. And I just wanted to like shout their stories out as loudly as I could. And I think that once I wanted to do that, that was really why I turned to music to do it, because that's the way if I have something I want to shout out, that's the way I do it. I'm a songwriter, and that's the vocabulary that I know. So that's what it became. And at first it was just a couple songs, and then I had a scene between between two of them that I wanted, and so I put the scene in, and then it just kind of got away from me. Like it kind of just became, it sort of snowballed. It was like this effect where all of a sudden it got bigger and bigger and bigger. And before long I realized it's like, oh, I guess I'm writing a musical. I really don't know how to do that. And then I kind of had to figure out how to write a musical, which was its own task. But yeah, first was just discovering them and kind of falling in love with this thing that they were able to do. And knowing that I wanted to.
And then the text was born.
Yeah, well, the first draft
when the music appeared, and who is your team you work right now? It's how many instruments, how many staff people, they are volunteer, or how it works, the project like this?
In order to, when I was writing it?
Yes.
In order to compose it?
At the beginning, and then when it's appears in a rock opera.
At the beginning, just me.
Okay.
Yeah. I wrote the first draft in 2019. I had to finish all my academic work first. I had to finish all my research for school, my thesis writing, all of this. I had to finish this first while I researched the couriers as well. And then I had 1 month left on an academic grant. And it was right before Rosh Hashanah in 2019. And I said, I want to finish the first draft by Rosh Hashanah. So I just sat down and wrote and recorded the first draft. And maybe it was not the best plan to do it. I mean, I barely slept. It was a crazy task, but I did finish it. It was not a good first draft, but it's a first draft. I think it's important to just get things down. And I wrote and recorded something like 15 songs. Only a handful of them are still in the show. So I've rewritten the show extensively since then. So like I said, that was fall of 2019. We had our first couple readings just with friends of mine in California in the beginning of 2020. And then I was going to do a reading with at Lambda, the London Academy of Music and Dramatic Art. I was there briefly. Like I said, I was there for drama school and dropped out, but I stayed in touch with some of the directors and professors. And we were going to go back and do a reading of the show there. But COVID hit, right? So everything shut down. And as we know, everything went nuts. I ended up just using that time. I mean, I just wrote and recorded and wrote and recorded and wrote and recorded. I mean, I just worked it and worked it and worked it for a year and a half. I hired a dramaturg at one point to go over things. I have a music producer, Brandon Jarrett in Los Angeles, who I've worked with him for a decade, and he's someone, I mean, I trust him with all of my musical ideas. So I sent him everything I was working on, and he gave me input. One of my music composition professors from undergraduate school, I sent him things also, and he gave me some input. And a theatrical director I worked with, same thing, just like giving me ideas, talking me through different ideas. A lot of it is just wrestling with ideas, You get so many things that are possibilities, and really most of the task is like saying no to different possibilities until you finally have a pathway of yes. So it took, I think, about a year and a half to have a draft that actually looked like something that could be done. And it took that long also to get something that looks at all like what it looks like now. And then it was a process of, I got it workshopped by the Alliance of Jewish Theater, and they showcased it. And then the first production was in 2022 at a theater in Rochester, New York.
I'm face to face with murderers who crave my blood.
You mentioned about academic grant.
Yeah.
It's the system of state, of the university. It's interesting also here in Ukraine to understand how to... We have a lot of ideas, but how to find the support, the financial support, how to find the cooperation, or to find these right people and to structure your idea and to go from idea to the project, to the product. And you mentioned like academic grant, which is interesting. It's something that the state, the country does, or university does.
Yeah, well, so the grant was for my university studies, not for Writing Rise. It was an Azrieli Foundation grant. So the Azrieli Foundation supports Holocaust education projects, and they have scholarships specifically for the Holocaust study, the Master's in Holocaust Studies program at Haifa University. So I was just, I think, fortunate enough to be granted one of those scholarships, which is what made it so that I could live and study for the full year that I did. I stretched the time out at the end so that I could work on Rise. But yeah, it was just kind of my way of figuring out how to, I mean, I had a grant to do these academic studies. I was kind of like, how can I also use this time and use this space to do the creative work that I want to do as well?
And how did you find the support, the financial support to develop this idea? It's like your individual or something it's a big project.
Yeah.
And how it works in the United States.
The first production in 2022, that was the theater in Rochester that picked it up. That is, to date, the only project that has been, that's the only time that the show has been produced by a theater and production company that's picked it up to produce it. Everything else that we've done, we've funded. So I've fundraised in order to do it. I think that there are, like, definitely having music and theater produced kind of on someone else's dime is something that does happen. Like I said, it happened for us. It happened for Rise in 2022. But very quickly, it became clear to me that if I wanted to do the show the way I wanted to do it and the way I thought it should be done, I was going to have to figure out how to produce it myself. That quickly became clear. It's a strange idea in a way. It was always kind of a weird idea to pitch when I was meeting with producers and theater companies and stuff. Because first of all, I've never written a musical theater show or an opera before, right? So I would sit down across from people and say, okay, you've never heard of me. I've got a musical theater show. It has like 24 people on stage, a bunch of electric guitar solos, and it takes place during the Holocaust. So what do you think? It's like a home run, right? I mean, it's like a nonsensical idea. They're like, what are you talking about? Like, first of all, a rock show about the Holocaust? No, we're not doing that. Second of all, you want to do a musical with like 20 people on stage? Like everyone, like any producer is just thinking, oh my God, it's so much money. We're never going to be able to do it. Even when I was writing it, I had people tell me, if you want to get something done, you got to write something with 2 or 3 people in it, like maybe 4. Otherwise, you're never going to be able to afford it. And I just never listened to that advice for better or worse. I just didn't listen, probably because it was probably a bit like, the beginner's mindset where, in a way, like I didn't have enough experience in the field to know how difficult it was going to be. So I didn't have very much fear going forward. There's an endurance athlete that I like who has, I think he's quoting someone else. I can't remember who said the original quote, but it's something like, be naive enough to start and stubborn enough to finish. And I think that naivete in the beginning really carried me through quite a bit, because if I had known how difficult it was going to be, if I'd known that then, I probably would have rethought it, honestly. But here we are. So even in the beginning, it was a weird idea. And I was very, very lucky, very fortunate that Center Stage Theater in Rochester, and in particular, Ralph, the producer there, picked it up. Because if he hadn't, I don't think we would have a first production under our belt. He picked it up, and then I thought, okay, it's had a production now. I can show that to people, and it will explain the idea a little bit more than me just saying it's a rock opera about the Holocaust. And so I thought it was going to, help a bit. I think it did help a bit, but nevertheless, it was still very difficult to find a place that was interested. Most places were kind of intimidated by it because it's so big, and because the subject matter was difficult. And then there were also places that were like interested in doing it, but they were their ideas of how to sort of bend it and shape it and make it more accessible to their audience, their ideas were weird. A lot of Jewish theaters didn't want to do it because to them, they would say, well, we don't want another Holocaust story. Mm-hmm. And I would try to explain, like, look, this is not another Holocaust story. I understand, yes, it takes place during the Holocaust, but you haven't heard this story yet, you know? And it's different. This is not the same kind of story, and it's not told in the same kind of way. But again, it was like hard to break that boundary. So I was like, okay, we're going to have to do this ourselves. So the first thing we did was I took the Rochester production and I dropped it in a different venue in Syracuse, New York, that the Jewish Federation of Central New York, one of their members had seen the Rochester production and really loved it and wanted to bring it to Syracuse, New York. So I worked with her to see how we could do it for as absolutely little money as possible. And looking back, I cannot believe that it worked out because it was almost nothing. And the process almost killed me. I mean, it was so exhausting, you know, to manage all of that myself without any production company or anything at all. But we did it. We managed to do that. And then there was a theater off Broadway in the theater district of New York City, and they wanted to showcase the show. And so I was in the process of trying to figure out how I was going to afford that when October 7th happened. And that really changed things in terms of trying to get the, I mean, when I came back to the States after that, trying to do the show in America after October 7th, then that was a whole other thing. Because then what happened is that theaters that otherwise would have been good fits for us to do Rise, a second production, a third production, whatever, they wouldn't even touch it. Because they said things like, oh, it's too political. The issue's just like, you know, it's maybe just not the right time. I had producers come flat out and say, it's just too Jewish. We can't have a Jewish story like this right now. I had theaters tell me that, yeah, we might like to do it, but we don't have the budget to cover the security that we would need for this. You know, so then after October 7th, it seemed like the only spaces that were interested in it were Jewish spaces. And that's all that we've done since then. We have performed numerous times in various iterations in various ways, but they've all been Jewish spaces. Hillel, the Israeli American Council, Holocaust Museum, Los Angeles, the Zeckelman Holocaust Theater, Zeckelman Holocaust Center in Michigan, JW3 in London. Now Jewish spaces want to do it. And I think like the Jewish community at large is very hungry and ready for these kinds of stories. It's something that's like, it's really resonating with us by and large. I think there's a catharsis to it and also an inspiration that we need from it. But it's very challenging to get this kind of story in a space that's not specifically Jewish.
I will give some context how we were connected and my first emotion about after you described how that it was a long way. I have no idea. I can't imagine. I just can't imagine how difficult you work to come to this moment. Because it looks, I mean, in some way, it looks like it's ready product. It have the website. It have YouTube short video. It's cool. And people, when they are outside of the process, they can imagine sometimes how much time, energy, efforts you should give from having this idea to the first results and not to lose it. And I got the email from my colleague from US office, project cashier, and they sent And when I saw at the beginning the name of email, Rock-opera, about Holocaust, two components, Rock-opera, which I have some stereotype. I mean, I have some picture, and Holocaust. It's always difficult issue.
Yeah.
But maybe when I see this performance with you, with your idea, and having some educational sessions during this Limud conference, I understand that it's endless issue. I mean, it can't be a lot, or it can't be. It's part of our history. I mean, it's more than 6 million people who pass. We can say that it's too much or it's not too much. I mean, it's always should be with us as part of our history. And yeah, it's the new way of speaking of this and saving this. And I didn't believe in the idea, and I just looked through the email and say, not today exactly. And in several days, my colleague Samantha called me back and say, what's about Rock-opera? I say, okay, I should check. And it's so cool that you had some links, and I listen and see the picture, and it was absolutely another performance I had in my mind. It was more acoustic, it was more melody, it was not so hard. And I thought that in Ukraine, not as part wider than Jewish community, I have no idea that we had something like this. And right now we see how we say cultural front, like the cultural project, they are born, and it will be so inspirational for people to find indirect ways of memorize, save the emotions, save the names, save the people. For me, it was so cool to find that you had not like women's, like very general name. You brought specific names, and it's always for me it's how to jump from big picture to very concrete details. I mean, in some ways, storytelling right now has so much influence on people, and we bring small stories. And these stories of this woman, I found so brave. But because of the invasion, I understand that now we experience the bravery of Ukrainians right now. I mean, it's the language I understand. You don't need to extra explanation for me. I understand what do you mean. And I say, yes, let's just, I'm ready to speak to Joshua. Let's do this. And I don't know how much time, 3 months passed.
Yeah.
And we have,
Here we are.
here we are.
Yeah.
And we
It was
had,
fast.
and it's one of the bright moments of Limud conference. And everyone who came to me spoke about Rock-opera and how it was the combination. And the main question, how did you find Ukrainian singers, female singers, how you bring these instruments? And let's speak about your feeling to work with Ukrainian partners, to Ukrainian people, to Ukrainian women, and how did you feel to bring here into Ukraine? Before we generally speak about Lviv and your experience of Ukraine during this big war, let's speak about this experience. I think how it was for you.
You know, I wanted to do something with Rise pretty much right when the war started. Russia invaded, I think it was 2 months before we went into rehearsal for the first production in Rise in Rochester. And it was really right then that I started thinking about and trying to figure out how I could bring Rise or some piece of Rise to Ukraine. And it took this long to find you and to find Project Kesher. But when I did, I knew it was going to work because the Hebrew word for the couriers was kashariyot, which is the same Hebrew word. It's the same root as Kesher in Project Kesher. It's that connection. So as soon as I saw that and I had the first conversation, I was like, this is going to work. I did not realize it was going to work so fast because it was like that. I mean, if you think like I wanted to do it for all those years, and then, we talked on the phone and I was thinking, okay, maybe we'll figure out how to do this next year sometime. And then he said, well, we have this Limud conference. It's at the end of October. And I was thinking, okay, end of October 2026. Yeah, we can do that. And he was like, no, October. I was like, oh, it's in like 3 months. Okay, let's do that.
I should jump because a lot of podcasts I hear or interview, our strongest feature of Ukrainians, it's fast.
Oh, really?
Everything happens right now so fast. Yeah. People don't waste time from the idea to people just do.
Yeah.
You have blackouts, you have night bumping, but people just do. I heard number of stories of cultural projects, of some kind of delivery to Europe of some stuff, or making interesting, and there was no any connection, and people appears. I'm so proud that for me it was like, 3 months, maybe not a lot of time, but it's fine, it's normal.
Yeah, it's great. It's great. Moving fast is a great thing. Usually it's one of the things that always drives me crazy about working in theater and music is that everything is like a year or a year and a half in advance. And I'm very impatient, I think, naturally. So anytime I'm like, oh my God, you got to be kidding me. Like we're talking about like a year from now. So to have it be like, we're talking about in like 2 or 3 months, it's like, wow, fantastic. Okay, I'm going to go book a flight. This is great.
But I need right person to speak to you, to speak your language, because I understand that it's number of technical questions.
Sure.
And I worked with the producer Sergey, whom I immediately speak and say, just give me short feedback. Can you help me with this? And he said, sure, absolutely. And then something happens between two of you, and I have no idea how quickly the final imagination I saw when I see bandura and violoncello.
Cello.
And what exactly you meant? And the singers. The women were just immense.
Yeah, and I guess that also apparently happened in a very Ukrainian fashion too, because that was all very fast too. Sergey and I spoke, and it was like, we just understood each other. I think we just understood each other like creatively and technically and what needed to be done. And I remember thinking, okay, like, what am I going to do? Am I going to bring in singers? That was my first thought. My first thought was that it's going to be faster and more efficient if I bring in singers, someone from LA or London who already knows the show, and we can bring in and we can perform. And then quickly that had its own difficulty to it, and I started thinking, I was like, well, why, I'm going into Ukraine. Why don't we just use Ukrainian singers and Ukrainian musicians and put this together? And Sergey was just like, oh yeah, I'll find you some people. I'm like, okay. And he sent over 2 singers who were like both amazing and both played these other instruments. And I don't think that they thought about playing their other instruments. I think they just thought about what they were singing on their audition videos and stuff. But then when I saw that, I was like, okay, cello, definitely. Let's see that. And then I saw the video of Angela playing a bandura, and I was like, what's that? What's going on here? This is so cool. I had never heard the instrument. I've never seen it. I was like, this is amazing. So it just became this thing that again kind of like snowballed and became something bigger than what I thought originally, and so much cooler than what I thought originally. And working with the musicians here, the concern then became, okay, how quickly can I get into Ukraine in order to rehearse with them? Do I need to be here like a week? Do I need to be here 2 weeks? What are we going to need? What kind of time are we going to need? And I had one session with them over Zoom. And I was like, oh, they're fine. They've got it. They've got it. You know how good that feels as a writer, as a creator, to just be like, to like be able to trust your work with somebody. Oh my God, it's such a relief, you know? And I got here in person, was it a day or 2 days before? The first time we rehearsed in person was the day before we performed. That was the first time we were in the room together, the first time we played the songs together, and we just played them through. And I was like, oh, wow. Like these, it's not just that they're pros, you know? It's not that just that they're professional. It's that they had clearly like done their work. They're clearly great musicians, great singers, and they had worked with the songs. They knew what was going on and was like, wow, let's just go play. So it's been, the whole thing was basically like, from the word go, I think, like since we said yes, I think it's basically just been like the smooth sailing, you know, very low effort. I don't know if you guys have been working, if you guys have been really struggling behind the scenes so that I feel like everything's going smoothly, maybe that's the case. But at least for me on my end and working with the musicians and performing and rehearsing and all of that, it's been like very, very smooth, very easy.
I'm proud of myself, which is not really good, but to have it's not right people. I don't like the expression right people. Professional people I trust. I speak one language. It's not the people who work like for money. They understand their values, the idea, creative way of bringing this idea.
Yeah.
And it's like you describe of snowball.
Snowballing.
When I started doing this podcast, I didn't understand to the end how it will work and what is the role of producer, and to trust the producer to have the conversation about the way how I do it, how to grow professionally. And you can do more, just the podcast. And I see that we are working with this project, working with the Rock-opera. It's like the way you open the new door. And I say that it happens. And Sergei brought his people he trusted, who knew. And it's really, sometimes I struggle with the people who believe in some kind of budgets or financial support. And I say it doesn't work if you have no right people, your people, great connection, and your believing in the idea. I really believed in the idea, and I was absolutely sure that the performance will be great. And this one song, We Ask You for This, The Warrior, which was translated, it was just amazing. And to listen both languages, Ukrainian in translation and English, and this performance, this all combination, it looks like we had a whole rock opera here at this time.
Yeah, the translation was special. Yeah, I was really, really happy that we could do that. That was the thing. Once we were using Ukrainian singers, and I was like, okay, well, I've got Ukrainian singers that are singing in English to a Ukrainian audience. Like, can I have them sing in Ukrainian? And maybe it's not enough time to do all the songs, but can we do one song? And then just thinking about, okay, like, what's Ukraine, and what are they enduring? What are they going through? What is happening right now? And it was like the Warriors, the song for Ukraine, you know? So if we could do that I just thought if we could do that, that would be amazing. And then again, how quickly that happened and how incredible the translation was. I mean, it was just like getting that back. I was like, I can't believe this is actually happening. And then, yeah, you know, what I again, Angela got the translation. She sent me a video of her playing bandura and singing it in Ukrainian. I was like, oh my God, it's just too amazing. So, yeah, I think that opened a doorway for me too. That opened a window for me too, thinking about, you know, I think that when I set out to write Rise, I set out to write a musical, you know, in the fashion of like a musical that's going to see like, you know, a big stage, Broadway in London, and this kind of like big stage musical. Over time, though, I recognize that there are other ways that it can really be expressed, and to see it done in this setting, in the Ukrainian language, with a traditional Ukrainian instrument, I think that to me was like, yeah, this is definitely one of the purposes of this show.
Two thoughts or messages. The first one is it's really unique how you can do like the full performance with big number, and how you can do it short for a small stage, for a small audience. I mean, because it's all, I mean, it's maybe very helpful and transformative to see how you can like to compare, like you can roll something and then you can you can play with this. Yeah. I mean, because we have something stable and say, no, I can do with one instrument, or I can do with one singer. It's very, I mean, for me, it's something I can use even with the work not connected with the music. Yeah. And the second message, it's how important to make this cooperation between you and our singers. I know that to work as a team, it's big experience. It's to make world is not so big one. It's about how we are looking for writing emails, and the email bring you to another piece of the world and bring you idea. Find organization, find the people. I know that everyone work hard, but it's still like sometimes I can hear from the youth, from another generation, I don't want to work hard as you. But if you have something really cool in your mind, it will take your energy. It need to work. Yeah. That's it doesn't look like easy. I write the music. I come to Ukraine. We found the singers. Here we are. But it's great experience, and I'm happy to have you here and to make this combination. And for the last moment, tell me about your find in Ukraine, because I'm the voice of Ukraine International, and it's really hard. It's really hard to speak about losses, about the life conditions when you looks great? I mean, people at the beginning of the war, people ask me, do you wash the hair or do you do like manicure? I mean, the imagine of the war and living in a war, it's different. And we show that we bring cultural projects international to the war country. And how do you find, how can you explain, how you explaining right now to your friends, to your people, how to live in Ukraine right now?
Yeah, I mean, it's a lot to unpack, because it's, the first night we were here, obviously there was a Russian air raid just outside Lviv. So even here in the West, I think that was one of the conversations that I had with people in the States when I was coming here, when I knew I was coming here, and they were concerned. I said, I'm going to Lviv, I'm going to the West, I'm not going to the East, I'm not going to the front. This is Lviv, and even the places in Ukraine that are often spared are not immune. And I mean, obviously, we know that from a few weeks ago when people in Lviv were killed. I think that maybe my only experience with this kind of thing is from living in Israel. Living in Israel before October 7th and living in Israel afterwards. And so I think there's a way that I understand the what it means to be a people at war that also insist on living, who insist on life every day and every night. Yes, you have the reality of war, you have the reality of the tragedy that is happening all the time, that touches everyone personally. I think that's something that I've found true in both countries, in both Israel and Ukraine, is like, you're not going to meet somebody who is not personally and directly affected by the war. Everyone has lost people. Everyone knows people who are in the fray. This is just a reality of life. And at the same time, you insist on living your life. You go out in Lviv, I imagine it's the same in Kyiv, and people are going to go dancing, and they're going to go out to dinner, and they're going to go to cafes, and they're going to sit and they're talk with their friends, and they're going to read books, and they're going to listen to music, and they're going to play music, and they're going to make art, and they're going to work, and they're going to do the things that they want to do, the things that are required of us to be alive, because that is I think that is part of the fight, and it's also a part of the victory. I think that it's hard to look at continuing to fight as a triumph, but I do think that it is. And I do think that that's something that I try to drive home in Rise, and particularly the way I end the show. And it's something that was really driven home to me in all the research that I did, is that, the Jews in the underground resistance during the Holocaust, Primo Levi has this quote in one of his books where he says that the resistance fighters weren't fighting to win. They were fighting for 3 lines in the history books. And it was just this understanding and this acknowledgement that just to fight is a victory. And you can pass that victory on generation to generation. And Ukraine is living, standing proof of that. It's not a bright, happy victory, but it is one. And I think it's very palpable. And being here and being with the Ukrainian people and seeing that, seeing the vibrancy of the city, just like buzzing with life, and at least, if nothing else, the veneer of normalcy in the midst of it, I recognize that as a victory and as a triumph. That is something that not Russia, not any war, no one can take that away. That is a spirit that cannot be beat. And it's an honor to be here and to witness it and be a part of it for a moment. And I hope very much that I get to come back and do it again.
Absolutely. It's our great plan. And 2026 is really close, and we can make plans. And Joshua, we are all so thankful that we can, through your performance, even through this podcast, we can show the people not only the tragedy, the losses of the war, but the dignity, the life, heroism of Ukrainians right now. Thank you so much for being here, for your energy, for your ideas, and we are all appreciate your support and your input in this life today. Thank you so
Thank you.
much.
Дякую.
Дякую.